Okay. So I'm recording again. So the sounds that are playing in the browser will probably not be part of the recording, but I'll set it up next time so that that works. I don't think it'll make a big difference for this example because we're just going to use a couple sounds at the end. But the main thing we're going to talk about is keyboard interaction and how to determine if the user is hitting keys and then what keys they're hitting. So it's similar to getting mouse events like we've done in some previous examples. The main difference between the keyboard and the mouse, of course, is that we have lots of keys. So we need to not only know that the key is being pressed, but which key is being pressed. And so we're going to look at how to do that today. So let's get started. I'm having another glitch here. Okay, I guess I made this worse somehow. I thought I fixed this issue, but it looks like it didn't. Okay, there we go. Okay. So as I mentioned, like mouse events, we also have keyboard events in P5. These are part of the environmental variables that P5 provides for us. So if we go to the P5 documentation, go to their reference page, and look at environment or events. Is it environment or events? I think it's events, yeah. You can see we have all the mouse events. We've covered those in some previous examples, but we also have keyboard events here. So we have some variable values like key is pressed is either true or false. Key is going to be a letter that matches the key that is being pressed or the previous key that was pressed if you've released the key. Key code is going to give us a code for the key, a numerical code, and we'll go over what that looks like in a bit. Key pressed and key released, and these guys are all functions, so they're like the mouse pressed. So just like we have mouses pressed versus mouse pressed, we have the same thing with the keyboard. So we'll look at a few examples of this. So key is pressed is just a variable value that's either true or false, depending on whether a key is pressed. So this could be any key on the keyboard. So I'm going to show this example over here. I have my basic sketch, and if I run this sketch, we have a gray background, and I can change the background color or of course do other things if the user hits a key. So what I need to do is use a conditional statement, just like with my mouse pressed, I need to say if. So I need to check if the user is pressing a key. So I can just say key is pressed. And if that's true, that'll just be true. And if it's false, it'll be false, of course. And I can change the background here. So let's change the background to purple. Okay, so of course it's gray now. And then when I'm clicking on it, nothing happens. All right, let's see. Did we get an error? No, that's weird. Let's try it again. Huh. That's weird. All right, let's log. So let's do some debugging. It's not working the way that I thought it would. So let's log the key is pressed value and see if that's working. So it's false when I'm not pressing the key. And oh, there we go. Okay. Now it's working. Oh, you know what? The problem is that you have to click. I always forget this. You have to click on the canvas first. It's not going to know. So if I just run this code and then I'm pressing keys, it doesn't. I'm still like focused on this section of my project. I have to click on the canvas first, and then if I hit a key, then I'll see the background change. So I always make that mistake. I always forget that. Um, but maybe it's a good thing to go over because you guys may have the same issue. Okay, so now if I hold the key on my keyboard, it doesn't matter what key I'm pressing. It's still going to change the background color because all I'm asking is if key is pressed, and that's going to be true as long as I'm pressing any key on the keyboard. Um, so actually, let's keep the console open and we'll look at some other parameters. Uh, let's keep going. So we also have this key value. And the key value, which we can see here in the documentation, is going to tell us what key we're actually pressing. So if I log key is pressed and then the key over here, you'll be able to see which key I'm pressing. So right now it's empty string, which is just there's no value there. And then if I hit enter, you can see that it's the enter key. And one thing is that it doesn't change once I stop pressing the key. It stays whatever the previous value is. So if I hit space, you can see there's a space there, and then it stays space. If I hit the down key or the right key or up or left or any of the letter keys, and actually, why don't we just display this on the page? So let's go down here and say text and just put key. And I'll put this in the middle of my canvas. So I'll just center the text and make it a little bit bigger so we can see it. And let's see. There we go. Okay. So now whatever is the last key that I pressed, and it recognizes the difference between capital characters and lowercase characters. So if I hit shift, it's going to be the shift key. But then when I hit that capital A, it becomes the capital A key. Whereas a lowercase a, it stays that. If I hit enter or my number keys or my symbols, so it kind of knows what key we're pressing. So that's another thing that we can do. We can say if the key is pressed, but then we can ask another condition. We can say if key equals P. Okay, we'll do P for purple. So we're putting one condition inside of our first condition. So we'll say if key is P for purple. So now when I hit P, we see the purple background. But if I hit A or B or C or enter, the background doesn't change. So we can test to see not only if a key is being pressed, but which key is being pressed. And there's a couple ways to write this if statement. One is how it's written here, where first we check if the key is pressed, and then we check what the key is. This is a good thing to do if you want to have multiple possibilities down here. So I could change this to if key equals B. Then we'll change the background to blue. Okay, so we have B for blue, P for purple, and any other key that we might press is not going to show up there. So that's one way we could write it. You could also write it as a compound statement. So you could say if key is pressed and double ampersand, key equals, let's do G for green. Then we'll do a green background. Okay, so this is going to work the exact same way. So I have G for green there. I have P and I have B. But you can see this one, if we only want to do one thing with a key press and a key, this is a more efficient way to write it. This is just 3 lines of code versus having a nested key press that has 5 or 6 lines of code. But a nested key press is good if we have multiple options. So let's put a comment here, nested if statement. Good for multiple options. And here we have a compound conditional. So compound just means there's more than one. We're putting more than one thing together. That's what compound means. And then conditional, of course, is our if statement. So we have one condition, we have and, so we are combining the two conditions. We have our key equals G. So our compound conditional is good for one behavior. So we have our G, we have our P, and we have our B. So we can use our key presses and change things about the sketch through whatever user events we're detecting um, as they're changing. Okay. So another way that we can check the key is using the key code. There's a website, keycode.info, and it used to be keycode.info. They got bought by this company Toptal, which I haven't really looked into what it is, but they kept the website the same, so it's still very useful. I think they actually added some stuff here. So I'll throw a link to here in the voice chat. And so this website is really useful because it essentially will tell me all the information about any key. And all I have to do is just hit the key. So if I hit A, we see that the key code is 65. That's going to be basically universal. Every computer is going to think of A as 65. Um, because one of the reasons this is useful is because we have multiple expressions of the same keys. Um, that's okay, Janae. Thanks for letting me know. No worries. Of course, I'm recording, so if you need to review stuff later, you can do that. I'll post the video when we're done. Um, but yeah, so the key A is 65, and then the key shift is 16. Of course, if I push those together, then I'm going to get capital A. But the A key is still 65. What this event would be is essentially the 65 plus the shift or the meta key. So we might not really need to worry about that because our project for this is going to be relatively simple. But if you were making a more robust application where you had to know, which key was being pressed and if modifier keys like shift or option or command were being pressed, then we'd need to use those numbers to differentiate between the different keys rather than just whatever the letter that they go along with is. So, and it can say if I do like option 65, you see there's that meta key down there. Control is 17, but control plus A gives me that one. There's the command on the Mac, which I guess this knows I'm on a Mac, or maybe it just always says that. I'm not sure what it would do for a Windows. So yeah, so if I hit A, you can see I get the regular A or the lowercase a. It's a general key. The key code is key A, and the key code numerical is 65. Whereas if I hit Shift, it says, this is a shift. It's a modifier key. This is the shift left. So you actually have, some keyboards have two shift keys. It's still 16, and that's the description. And then if I hold Shift and A at the same time, I get the capital A. Anyway, this website is mainly just useful just to know what those different key codes are, because I can put in any key, I can say Q or P or O, and it'll tell me what the number that I would be looking for is. So we can use the key code to just compare numbers instead of keys. So let's say for my G, instead of a letter, I wanted to look at the key code. I could change key to key code, and then I could type G here, and I would find that the key code is 71. And so I could replace this G with 71, and it's going to work the same way. One thing I do want to make sure to do is if I use key codes instead of letters, this might be, most people probably won't have memorized all of the key codes, so I'll just put a note here that says 71 equals G. So if some other developer is modifying my project, they'll know what this 71 stands for without having to go look it up in the table. So those are key codes. You can use key codes or letters. Either one is fine. The case with G is now it's going to work if I'm hitting G, regardless if I'm holding Shift or not. So if I'm holding Shift and I hit G, I'm going to get the green background. Whereas if I was just comparing to the lowercase g, it wouldn't work if I was holding Shift. So it may depend on what the use case is. Okay. So then key pressed is the function. So the function is actually going to be a little bit more useful in some cases for the examples that we're going to do. So I'm gonna download a sound, and so I'll demonstrate how to do that a little bit. Although I guess since I'm streaming my browser, I'll just switch the stream when I do that process. And then when we do our second sound thing, I'll have the sound set up a little bit more um, with the audio uh, audible in either way. Um, what I'm going to do is add in a key press. So again, if I'm using the draw function and I'm looking at key as pressed versus which key am I pressing, that's good for graphics because we want to keep drawing our graphics, but it's not actually good for playing sounds because we only want to play the sound once. We don't want to like constantly trigger the sound, or maybe you do if you're trying to make like an interesting effect or something like that. But for the most part, we don't want to like have a sound being triggered over and over and over again. Um, so what we're going to do now is download a sound to use in our project, and I'll use the key pressed function instead of the key is pressed Boolean. So I'm going to switch the stream to full uh, screen view for a second so you guys can see the UI because I'm going to have to download the file and upload it to my project. And so I'll show you guys, I'm going to use this website called freesound.org. This is a website I actually use a lot for my own work, whether I'm making like a video game or an animation or something like that. If I want a sound effect, this is usually the first place that I go to. There's a lot of other websites that have similar things like archive.org or Open Game Art or Wikimedia. So this is not the only resource, but this is the one that I find to be the most useful. I am going to log into my account because you can see the sounds, but you can't download the sounds unless you're logged in. It's all free, as the name obviously implies. So I'm going to download a sound here. I guess in my example, I use like chickens, but I don't have to do that. Let's see. Let's use a sound of a, let's use a dog sound. Maybe we can find a good dog bark. That's pretty good. Oh, there's a dog toy. This might be kind of funny. Okay, that's pretty funny. Although you guys can't hear this right now because I'm streaming my desktop, so that's okay. I'm gonna download this dog toy sound. You'll hear it when I put it into the app. So I'm gonna click download here. It's also not going to be part of the recording, so if you're watching this later on the recording, the sounds are not going to come through because I don't have the computer audio routed right now, but I will in future examples. Anyway, here's my dog toy sound. I'm just going to call this dogtoy.wave just to simplify the file name a little bit. This is a Creative Commons zero license, so that means I don't have to like give credit for it. I can just use it and do whatever I want with it. I am going to copy this URL and put it in the comments up here, just so I can credit it if I want to, and I also have a link to it if I ever need to get it again. And then I'm going to open up my file system here, and just like we did with our images, I'm just going to add the file into the project folder. So I'm going to click the drop down here and go to upload file. And then I'll just click on here and go to downloads. There's my dogtoy.wave, so I'll open that up. And so now we can use it, and I'm gonna also have to load it just like I had to load an image. So it's almost exactly the same as using an image, but in this case we are using a sound. So I'm gonna close that, and I'm gonna switch my stream back to the browser so you'll be able to hear the audio. Okay, so just like when we're loading our images, we need a global variable first to create a place where we can load the sound data. And then we're going to use a preload function, again, just like we load an image, to make sure that the sound is loaded before we try to use it. So I'm going to make a variable dog toy sound, and I'm just going to declare the variable to hold the sound file. because I'm going to use it in the preload function as well as the draw function. So I'm going to say function preload. And I'm going to say dog toy sound equals load sound. And then here I just have to get the path. So it's just dog underscore toy dot wave. You can always rename the file if you need to. You can go over here and click on rename. But you can also just use the name of the file. So once I loaded the sound, now I can play it. So I can put this function really wherever. So I'll just go ahead and put it right here. So this is key pressed. And I can just, again, test if any key is pressed. And then if it is, I can play my sound. So I'll say key pressed, dog toy sound dot play. And so now if I press a key, we hear the sound. It's a little long. I probably should have edited it down. You can always edit it in like Audacity or something like that, but um, works for now. You can hear if I hit multiple keys, it's actually playing multiple copies of the sample. So if I hit two keys at the same time, you can maybe hear that it's playing twice. If I hit like a bunch of keys, it's playing a bunch of versions of it. I'm going to go over more sound stuff next week, but there are some basic things that we can look at right now to change that. So if we go back to P5, sound is actually handled by a separate library in P5. It is added by default. So if we look at the index.html, you'll see that the first script here that's being loaded is the P5 script. But the second script is actually p5.sound.min.js. So it's added to all of our projects by default, even though we haven't been using it in the past. So if you're creating a P5 sketch outside of the P5 editor, you would actually have to add this separate sound library. But so we can find the documentation under libraries. And then if we scroll down a little bit, the first library is this core library, p5.sound. And if we go over here, it's a slightly different format, but it's essentially the same type of reference as our main P5 reference. And so what we're using is actually a sound file. And so if you click on the sound file, you can see something very similar to what we just went over. They're using a couple different things, like they're saying canvas pressed, which is sort of like mouse pressed, but only on the canvas. But otherwise it's pretty much the same. But you can also see some of the options here. So one of them, so play the sound is just play. You can pause, you can loop the sound. I'm going to go over some more of these options next week. But the play mode is whether you're going to play multiple sounds or whether you're going to restart the sound. So sustain is the default mode. That means if I hit two keys at the same time, it'll play the sound over itself. Restart means that it's going to skip the sound back to the beginning. So let's listen to what that sounds like, the differences there. So the default is sustain, and if I hit key, you can see it just keeps adding copies of the sample. If I go into setup and I say dog toy sound dot play mode, and then I think this is this is a method. So if I say restart, now it's going to restart the sample. So you can hear it starting the sample back at the beginning. So the last thing to do now is if I want to make sure that this sound only plays when I hit a certain key, I can still use my basic logic here. I can say if key or key code equals, and then set it to a sound. So if I want the sound to only play when the dog toy sound is playing, I'm going to look up the key code. I'm going to use D, so D is 68. So I'm going to say if key code equals 68, and I'll put a note here, 68 equals D. Then I'm going to move my dog sound.play inside of my if statement. Uh, and now it'll play the sound if only when I hit D. So there's D. And if I hit other keys, it doesn't play. So I can play multiple different sounds, and we'll go over this on Monday, but if I wanted to add more sounds, I would just add more variables, load more sounds in preload, and then add more conditionals for specific keys that play the different sounds. One last little thing, so if I want to have a visual that goes along with my sound, I could say if key code equals 68. Let's just pretend this looks like a dog. So I'm going to change the fill down here. I'm not going to draw a whole dog, but I'll just draw like a circle. Um, I'll do fill is gold. We'll do a golden retriever. And then I'll do a circle, and I'll just put this uh, here. And so now if I hit the D key, we see our dog. But notice that the dog stays there after it's done, after the sound is done playing. So we can attach visuals to the keys, but if we want to attach it to the sound, another thing that we can do is use our sound, and then we can use the method is playing, and that will just tell us if it's playing or not. If it's true, then it's playing. If it's not, then it's not playing. So I can replace this statement with dog toy sound that is playing. So if the sound is playing, then draw the dog. So now if I hit D, we see our dog, which is really just a circle, and then it goes away when the sound is playing. So we'll use that a little bit more on Monday when we do some more stuff with sound. But this will give you enough to get started creating like a very basic sound sampler where you can have different sounds that get triggered by different keys on the keyboard, and then you can have different visuals that go along with those sounds. So I'm going to stop here for today. We can work on projects for the rest of the class. If you guys have questions, of course, we can go over them. And yeah, you can get started on this assignment if you are ready, or if you're still working on previous assignments, you can work on those assignments. Um, and yeah, we're still on this sort of like weird split schedule. So the next time we'll meet is Monday. We'll go over some more stuff with sound, and then this assignment will be due a week from today, so next Wednesday. So let me stop